Now then, time to take you through the morning papers. Here with me to review them are two guests in the studio, which is quite exciting for me because I haven't had them for a very long time. Author and journalist Nikki Hodgson and Chief Executive of the International Marketing Partners, Alison Stewart. Alan, look, I can look you right in the eyeball. It's very exciting. I know, it takes me back to pre-pandemic days. Anyway, lovely to have you both here. We probably ought to talk about the papers, not just about the fact that you're both here. So let's crack on. Nikki, The Guardian, first of all, they've got a front page headline suggesting that a lot of people are looking for alternatives to their GP. So what are they saying?
Yeah, so this is about private in-person appointments with GP practices. There's a burgeoning growth in them, and it's not just the online appointments that people have been having through various health providers. It's a physical appointment with a doctor that lasts between half an hour and an hour, but people are paying a whacking £550 an hour to see a private GP.
An hour?
It is an hour.
So many people have appointments for an hour. I mean, it's still a lot of money.
They don't, but obviously because lots of people have stored up health problems from during the period in COVID where they didn't see, even half an hour is charged at £275. And half an hour goes very quickly, actually, if you've got a few things to talk about. You know what they always say in the GP, make a double appointment and stick to one issue. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of terrifying because, I mean, these prices are just so high. This is not going to be affordable for vast numbers of people, but it shows how desperate people are getting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. A huge amount of money and obviously an increase in the use. And I think they're suggesting that there are more and more services that are popping up because they see the demand because of people's frustrations with the current system. Take us on to the Eye now, Alison, with you, because this is a story that features on a few of the front pages, isn't it?
Yep.
And it's some optimistic news about energy prices for the first time.
Absolutely. We could all do with some good news. This is the story of falling prices, energy prices. The energy price cap is due to fall 18%. The average family, therefore, might save around 500 or so pounds. The cap is dropping to around a little over £2,000 per year, which is really welcome news in the current environment where, people are clearly struggling to balance paying for food or paying for heating. So this is a good news story. It also has a knock-on impact on general inflation. So we know, for example, the prices of groceries have risen 20% over the last 12 months or so, which is amazing. It's one of the highest rises in the world in this country. So the fact that, we're hearing and seeing that with energy prices falling, hopefully that has a knock-on impact also on production prices that go into making the foods, and therefore hopefully also pressure on the grocers to ultimately lower our prices too. So it has a lot of a domino effect, which should bode well for everybody.
Well, that's right. Energy prices feed into so many different items when you think about it, doesn't it, Nikki? It's on the front page of the Daily Mail as well, isn't it?
It is. And the Mail's reporting the same, basically, and just saying, this is the wholesale gas prices went up so much when the war in Ukraine started, when Russia invaded, and actually the drop in the prices is kind of a blow to Putin as well. It's kind of taking some power away from him. It is important to say, though, that I feel there was more the government could do to help us with energy prices. It's not just the war in Ukraine made the energy bills go up and then we all had that passed on to us. I don't feel the government did enough to help people. It's kind of good news. It's important that this story is on the Mail right now because they're obviously supporting Rishi Sunak. We're going to start talking about election bids. This is kind of why this story is here today. It's just stressing that, things are getting better for people, so maybe you don't need to kick the Tories out just yet.
Right, you see, it's part of a political campaign by them. Also, the other point that should be made is bills are coming down, but they're still way above what they were pre-crisis, aren't they?
And it's something where typically we wouldn't expect to pay a lot anyway. So, I don't know how good news it is actually in that sense.
But it's an improvement on where we were at the very least. Alison, take us to the Financial Times. I don't actually know which article on the front page you...
Yeah, so it's the man behind industrial scale online bank scam. So there's a gentleman in his early 30s who created a subscription service to a dark web website, if you like, that sold tools for for sucking money out of people's bank accounts. And the tool was a way of phoning customers and pretending to be from a legitimate bank. So the customer didn't know that this was not HSBC or NatWest or Lloyd's and all the others, and therefore had a long conversation with the caller and gave away all of their details and had the money taken out of their account. And this is a global tool that this guy created. And you'd pay for the privilege of having access to this online tool and impersonating a bank. Globally, £100 million was sucked out of people's bank accounts. It's the biggest fraud the Met Police has ever dealt with. And now he's been sentenced, thankfully, to 13 plus years in prison for having conned consumers out of millions of pounds.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's another good news story in a funny way.
Absolutely. A reminder as well that you have to be so alert, don't you? But
Absolutely.
when you think this is a genuine number that's
Of course.
calling you, then
Of course.
how are you supposed to know? So it's, you know,
Yes.
you have messages sent out all the time
Of
to
course.
be very alert and aware, but sometimes
Yes.
it's hard to spot.
Yes, and unfortunately, consumers now are much more wary. You know, they shouldn't have to be like that, but now we're much more suspicious of any sort of phone call that we get because it could well be a fraud like this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I find myself sometimes even with friends' emails, and they've got a link in them, and I think, well, that's probably not them. And, you know, and they're like, why didn't you answer my email? So it is quite hard, isn't it? You have to sort of think twice all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on, shall we, to, where are we going next? Are we going to the Times? And this is their front page story. And so this is really interesting, isn't it? It's a letter sent from leaders in the world of education concerned about AI. And we've had a lot of warnings about AI. So why are the particular worries about schools?
Well, this is coming from teachers and educators who are basically saying AI is a clear threat to education because it's basically making life too easy. It's stripping out thinking, but also from the perspective of teachers using it, there's a suggestion that it could be used to mark work. We know AI is not good enough yet to be completely reliable, and we're just kind of not at a point where we've worked out how to use it properly to our benefit. But this is really sort of saying that Anthony Seldon, who's a former university vice-chancellor, and he's like kind of the head of the body of these people, is saying potentially, you know, this change is as great as the printing press, but there are lots of problems that come with that. Education is just not ready for it. I mean, the problem with AI is that the genie's out of the bottle and governments were too slow to react to it developing, because the British government was certainly ahead of the curve. And, you know, teachers themselves are sort of saying, look, this isn't going to work. If a kid can go on ChatGPT and get the answer to an essay, why would they bother doing it themselves? It's going to be very, very difficult to, you know, stop it infiltrating teaching.
And Alison, I get the impression that the pace of change has shocked even people within the industry.
Absolutely.
And so the battle for regulators and governments to keep up with making sure that it's safe is a really tough one.
Of course.
I mean, there's not only that issue about the dangers, but there's also the risks of stopping some of the advances that could be positive as well.
Correct.
It's a really tricky issue.
It's a very tricky issue, and generally speaking, governments around the world are always behind the curve, especially when it comes to tech. But with any innovation, you know, it takes legislators a very long time to catch up, partly because they don't have the expertise, partly because they're busy focusing on other things. So whether it's AI, whether it's vaccines, whether it's electric cars, across the board, whether it's platforms such as Facebook and others. So legislators really need to get quickly up to speed on what are the implications of AI across the board. And they're going to always just be a little behind, unfortunately. So that's why this is quite important, is just to make sure we pay attention to this.
Yeah. And children are always very savvy at working out
Always.
the latest, especially if it might help them. Yeah. And I think very quickly, let's touch on the Star. I think, Alison, really wanted to look at this because it includes Rishi Sunak's declining fortunes.
Yes, really more of his wife's declining fortunes. The rich list, the Times Rich List, has now been published. We see some nice names like Adele on there, and Jim Radcliffe, of course, but also Mr. Sunak's wife has lost some money through a variety of financial market turbulence. But I think really the point of this story is that we're in a cost of living crisis, and we have a prime minister who potentially is not like the people he represents.
Well,
I think that's the
saying
bottom line.
He's lost a lot of money, but he's still pretty well off, let's face it. We are out of time, but I'm pleased to say you'll be back in the next hour when we'll have a few more stories from inside the papers. Lovely to see you both. See you very shortly. All the top stories coming up next.